20 years later, U.S. Senate may finally end authorization for war on Iraq. A U.S. Senate committee backed legislation on Wednesday to repeal 2 authorizations for past wars in Iraq, paving the way for a possible full vote in the Senate before the 20th anniversary of the last invasion by American troops. And from Breitbart, Senate committee votes to end military authorization for Iraq, Gulf News, and Gulf Wars. The Senate will soon hold a vote to officially end the authorized use of military force in Iraq and Kuwait, which could close the books on the Iraq and Gulf War. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed a bill to end military authorization with a bipartisan 13-8 vote on Wednesday, The Hill reports. The bill, sponsored by Senator Todd Young, a Republican from Indiana, and Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia, comes after multiple attempts to repeal the authorized use of force. According to Kaine, passage of the bill would be significant because future presidents may otherwise be able to abuse their ability to send troops to either country, despite troops being long withdrawn from both conflicts. Although the 1991 Gulf and 2002 Iraq wars are over and Iraq's no longer an enemy, the authorizations for use of military force remain on the books, said Kaine in a statement. Congress has a constitutional and moral responsibility to repeal them so that the future presidents can't use these authorizations as a blank check to send service members into harm's way. I'm glad we're one step closer today to repealing these outdated and unnecessary AUMFs. I welcome Majority Leader Schumer's commitment to bring our bill to the Senate floor in coming weeks, and I urge my colleagues to pass our bipartisan bill so we can formally end the Gulf and Iraq wars. Schumer voiced his support for passing the bill once it reaches the Senate floor. This Senate Foreign Relations Committee has reached an agreement to move forward on the repeal of the Iraq AUMF, Schumer tweeted. We need to put the Iraq war behind us once and for all, and doing that means we should repeal the legal authority that initiated the war to begin with. This Senate Foreign Relations Committee has reached an agreement to move forward on the repeal of the Iraq AUMF. We need to put the Iraq war behind us once and for all, and doing that means we should repeal the legal authority that initiated the war to begin with, Schumer said. The United States launched the Gulf War in August 1990 following the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. The conflict lasted just a few months before troops were withdrawn the following February. More than 200 U.S. troops were killed. The invasion of Iraq began in 2003 and former President Barack Obama withdrew troops in 2011. More than 7,000 U.S. soldiers died in the Iraq War. Brown University estimates as many as 300,000 Iraqi civilians died in relation to the war as of 2019. Young said, current Iraq-U.S. relations will only be strengthened if the bill passes into law. I'm encouraged by today's vote, and it's now time to bring the legislation to the Senate floor, Senator Young said in a statement. Later this month will mark the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, and today Iraq is a partner of the U.S. and critical to efforts to counter Iran. Repealing these outdated AUMFs will demonstrate America's commitment to Iraq's sovereignty. Just as important, it is vital to restoring the proper role of Congress in authorizing the use of military force and affirmatively stating when conflicts are over. And from Fox8.com, Senate panel passes bipartisan bill to repeal Iraq Gulf War authorizations. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed bipartisan legislation on Wednesday to repeal the Iraq and Gulf War military force authorizations, which are still in effect after the conflicts ended. The bill, sponsored by Senators Tim Kaine and Todd Young, passed on 13-8 vote in the committee. Kaine said the 1991 Gulf War authorization and the 2002 Iraq War authorization are decades behind the U.S., but they remain on the books and can technically be misused by a sitting president. Congress has a constitutional and moral responsibility to repeal them so that future presidents can't use the authorizations as a blank check to send service members into harm's way, Kaine said in a statement. The Gulf War ended in 1991 after a brief U.S.-led military campaign in Kuwait and some parts of Iraq, and former President Obama pulled U.S. troops out of Iraq in 2011, bringing an end to the 2003 invasion. Attempts to end the authorizations for the use of military force for the Gulf War and the Iraq War have been introduced several times before in Congress, including an effort last year that got snagged in congressional business, or got snagged in congressional business. There are some signs The AUMF repeals are now picking up steam. A companion bill was introduced in the House and Senate. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has vowed to back the legislation once it comes to the floor. In a tweet last week, Schumer said, "We need to put the Iraq war behind us once and for all, and doing that means we should repeal the legal authority that initiated the war to begin with." In a Wednesday statement, Young said he was encouraged by today's vote. Later this month will mark the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. Today, Iraq is a partner of the U.S. and critical to efforts to counter Iran, Young said. Repealing these outdated AUMFs will demonstrate America's commitment to Iraqi sovereignty. And watch this space. We'll be back with more news.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Lokai is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me.
I thought you scientists were supposed to keep an open mind.
There's a difference between keeping an open mind and believing something because you want it to be true.
Your friend Spock is a logical man.
I find your arguments strewn with gaping defects in logic.
Most illogical reaction. We demonstrated our superior weapons. They should have fled.
You mean they should have respected us?
Of course.
Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only black and white.
The whole notion of logic.
Completely pragmatic. And we poor, irrational humans whip them in a fair fight. Now you'll find yourself back among us illogical
The whole
humans,
notion of logic.
Which I find eminently satisfactory, Doctor. For nowhere am I so desperately needed.
Because she feels. I don't. All I know is logic.
The whole
Will you
notion
try to
of
understand
logic.
how we feel about our life here? About each other?
Emotions are alien to me.
The whole notion of
You're
logic.
gonna leave here without them? Run off on some wild goose chase halfway across the galaxy just because you found a discrepancy in a hydrogen cloud?
Doctor, I'm chasing the captain, Lieutenant Uhura, and Ensign Chekhov, not some wild aquatic fowl.
Mr. Spock, you have a remarkably logical and analytical mind.
The whole notion of logic.
I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.